In the shadow of the Montana Rockies, where the dawn paints the sky in hues of fire and frost, a scream tore through the heart of Meadow Creek Wildlife Sanctuary. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the bellow of an elk, but the raw, heart-wrenching cry of a child, alone, abandoned, her voice a fragile thread in the vast wilderness. 4-year-old Lila sat crumpled on a gravel path, her faded red hoodie no shield against the biting chill. Her sobs echoed, a desperate plea that silenced the forest's morning chorus. Then, from the pines, a shadow moved. A massive grizzly bear, Titan, his amber eyes blazing with primal intensity. His roar shattered the air, a sound that could stop a heart. Was this the end for the lost girl, or the beginning of something unimaginable? As Titan's paws thudded closer, kicking up dust, the wild held its breath, poised on the edge of a miracle. Titan's story began years before, in a shadowed glade where tragedy had struck. Nora Callahan, a 28-year-old wildlife ranger with a fierce love for the creatures she swore to protect, had found him. A shivering cub, no larger than a loaf of bread, curled against his mother's lifeless body. Poachers, slipping through the sanctuary's porous boundaries under cover of night, had left the sow bleeding out, her fur matted with crimson, her eyes staring blankly at the stars. Titan, too young to survive alone, whimpered softly, his tiny claws clutching at his mother's side as if willing her to wake. Nora's heart shattered at the sight. She'd joined Meadow Creek at 19, trading the clamor of city life for the wild's raw, untamed beauty, driven by a passion to preserve endangered species. Kneeling beside the cub, her breath catching in her throat, she made a vow to save him, her hands trembling as she lifted his fragile body into her arms. Nora's cabin, a weathered haven tucked among the pines, became Titan's nursery. She spent sleepless nights bottle-feeding him warm milk, her hands calloused from work, but gentle as she cradled him. His plaintive cries filled the small space, a haunting echo of his loss. Nora sang to him, old folk tunes her grandmother had taught her voice soft and steady, hoping to soothe his grief. She'd wake at odd hours, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, to check his breathing, her fingers brushing his soft fur. Titan's survival demanded more than milk. He needed a family, a connection to his kind. Nora, who'd studied bear behavior for years, knew he couldn't grow too attached to humans, lest he'd lose his place in the wild. At 6 months, she introduced him to Willow, a gentle sow who'd just birthed her second cub. Willow was a paradox, fiercely protective yet tender, her amber eyes radiating a warmth that could melt the coldest heart. Nora held her breath as Willow sniffed the cub, her massive head lowering to inspect him. Rejection could mean death for Titan, but Willow nuzzled him, pulling him close with a soft grunt. Nora exhaled, tears stinging her eyes, her relief as vast as the mountains. Willow's acceptance was a gift, a second chance for the orphaned cub. Over the years, Nora watched Titan grow into a colossus, a bear whose presence commanded the wilderness. His shoulders broadened, his fur thickened into a rich russet mantle, and his roar could silence the forest, sending smaller creatures scurrying. Male grizzlies often roamed alone, and Titan's departure from Willow's side was a rite of passage fraught with peril. Rival males could challenge him, their battles over territory or mates brutal, often ending in blood. Meadow Creek was safer than the wild, with its veterinary team on call and anti-poaching patrols scouring the boundaries. But it wasn't a sanctuary free of danger. Nora tracked Titan with a GPS collar, its faint beep a lifeline to the cub she'd raised. She'd spent countless evenings on her cabin's porch, binoculars in hand, watching him lumber through meadows or nap under ancient spruces, his massive form blending with the earth. Her bond with him was unspoken, built on trust earned through years of quiet presence, her voice a familiar hum in his world. The sanctuary, for all its beauty, was under siege. Poachers, emboldened by weakened fences and lax patrols, had infiltrated the boundaries, their tire tracks scarring the earth like open wounds. Nora and her team worked grueling hours to reinforce the perimeter, installing motion sensors, repairing wire mesh, and setting up trail cameras. The work was relentless, the stakes life or death. Nora's dreams were haunted by visions of Titan's mother, her lifeless eyes staring into nothingness, a reminder of what was at risk. The poachers hadn't struck in months, but their threat loomed, a shadow over the sanctuary's mission to protect endangered species like the grizzly. It was through one such breach, a twisted gap in the fence hidden by overgrown brambles, that Titan, rousing from a nap beneath a towering spruce, heard the girl's cries. His stomach rumbled, urging him to hunt, but a strange scent stopped him cold, human, laced with fear, unfamiliar yet hauntingly familiar. Following the sound, his massive paws silent on the earth, Titan emerged onto the gravel path and saw her. A tiny figure, alone, her sobs slicing through the quiet like a blade. Her red hoodie was frayed, its zipper broken, and her sneakers were caked with mud, as if she'd wandered far before collapsing. A tattered stuffed bunny hung from her hand, its button eyes dangling by threads, a silent witness to her despair. Titan's instincts clashed, hunger, curiosity, and something deeper, a memory of loss that stirred in his bones. He circled her, his massive form casting a shadow that swallowed her small body. The girl's cries pierced his ears, and his behavior shifted. He paced faster, his tail twitching, his amber eyes flickering with conflict. Was he predator or protector? The answer hung in the air, heavy as the mountains. Then, a new scent hit his nostrils, a sharp, musky tang that set his hackles rising. From the brush emerged Rune, a younger grizzly, lean and aggressive, his lips curled in a snarl. Drawn by the commotion, Rune saw the girl as easy prey, a chance to assert dominance in Titan's territory. Titan's roar turned feral, a sound that seemed to crack the sky, shaking the earth beneath the girl's feet. His gaze locked on Rune, not the child, his body coiling with purpose. In a blur of muscle and fury, Titan charged, leaping over the girl's head to slam into Rune with the force of a landslide. The girl gasped, spinning to see the bears collide, a whirlwind of claws and teeth that churned the dust into a haze. Titan pinned Rune to the ground, his roars drowning out the younger bear's growls, his massive paws slashing at Rune's flank. The girl's bunny fell from her hands, landing in the dirt, its worn fabric stained with the morning's chaos. Nora, patrolling in her weathered jeep, its shocks creaking over the uneven terrain, rounded a bend and slammed on the brakes. Her breath caught, her heart lurching into her throat. Two bears locked in combat was a familiar sight in her decade at Meadow Creek. But the girl, mere feet away, her small body frozen in the chaos, made her blood run cold. Nora's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, her hands gripping the wheel until her knuckles whitened. She gunned the engine, the jeep lurching forward, her eyes darting between the bears and the child. Rune broke free, limping into the trees, his flank bloodied, his growls fading into the distance. Titan turned back to the girl, and Nora braced herself, her breath shallow. She loved Titan, trusted him as much as one could trust a wild creature. But bears were unpredictable, their instincts a law unto themselves. What she saw next defied belief, rewriting everything she thought she knew about the wild. Titan lowered his massive body beside the girl, curling around her like a living fortress, his thick fur a barrier against the world. His amber eyes scanned the horizon, vigilant, daring any threat to approach. The girl, trembling, reached out with a shaking hand and touched his fur, her tiny fingers brushing the coarse strands as if seeking reassurance. Titan didn't flinch, his steady breaths a counterpoint to her ragged ones. Nora's hands shook on the wheel, tears welling in her eyes. She remembered finding Titan, a helpless cub mourning his mother, his whimpers echoing in her ears. Had the girl's cries stirred that same primal grief, urging him to protect her? Or was it something deeper, a spark of compassion that transcended species, a recognition of shared loss? Whatever the reason, Nora knew she had to act, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and awe. She killed the engine, the jeep's rumble fading into silence. Stepping out, her boots crunched on the gravel, each sound amplified in the tense air. Titan's gaze flicked to her, his ears twitching, his massive head tilting slightly. He knew her scent, her voice, the steady rhythm of her presence, a human who'd been part of his world since he was a cub. Nora stood still, her hands open at her sides, her breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Titan assessed her, his amber eyes searching hers. After a tense moment, he rose, stretched his massive frame with a low grunt, and ambled away, his tail swaying like a metronome. The girl remained unharmed, her small body curled in the dust, her sobs quieter now, as if Titan's presence had anchored her. Nora rushed to the girl, scooping her into her arms, the child's warmth a stark contrast to the morning's chill. "You're safe, sweetheart," Nora whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The girl clung to her, burying her face in Nora's jacket, her body trembling. Nora retrieved the stuffed bunny, brushing off the dirt with care, and handed it back. The child hugged it tightly, her eyes still wide with shock, her cheeks streaked with tears. Nora carried her to the Jeep, settling her in the passenger seat, a blanket tucked around her small frame. She drove slowly to the sanctuary's office, her mind a storm of questions. Who was this girl? How had she ended up here, alone in a bear's domain? The gravel crunched under the tires, each sound a reminder of the fragile moment they'd just survived. In the office, a cluttered space filled with maps, radio equipment, and stacks of field notes, Nora wrapped the girl in a wool blanket and offered a granola bar. The child nibbled hesitantly, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the pinned photos of bears and wolves, the worn coffee mug on Nora's desk. Nora knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked softly, her voice a gentle tether. "Lila," the girl whispered, her voice fragile as glass, barely audible over the hum of the office heater. Nora's chest tightened, a pang of protectiveness surging through her. She pulled up the CCTV footage, her fingers trembling as she clicked through grainy clips, her heart bracing for what she might find. The truth unfolded like a punch to the gut. A rusted pickup truck appeared on the screen, idling just beyond the sanctuary's fence under a moonless sky. A young woman, her face gaunt and etched with despair, stepped out, holding Lila. Her movements were frantic, her eyes scanning the darkness as if expecting pursuit. She spotted a gap in the fence, a twisted section of wire hidden by overgrown brambles, and squeezed through, Lila clutched tightly in her arms. On the gravel path, she knelt, kissing Lila's forehead with a tenderness that belied what came next. She whispered something, words the camera couldn't catch, her hands shaking as she set Lila down. The girl reached for her, but the woman turned, tears streaming down her face, and fled back to the truck. The vehicle sped away, its taillights fading into the night, leaving Lila alone. Lila wandered a few steps, calling out, "Mama, Mama." Her voice was swallowed by the wind, her small body sinking to the ground as she clutched her bunny. Her cries grew louder, a desperate plea that had drawn Titan to her side. Nora's throat tightened, tears blurring her vision as she watched the footage loop. The woman's kiss had been loving, desperate, a gesture of heartbreak rather than cruelty. Had she believed the sanctuary's cameras would ensure a quick rescue? Was she fleeing danger, poverty, or something darker? A threat that forced her to abandon her child? Nora's heart ached with questions she might never answer, each one a weight on her soul. Lila, now calmer, sat cross-legged on the floor, her granola bar half-eaten, her bunny cradled in her lap. Nora made calls to the authorities, her eyes never leaving the girl. Her voice was steady, but her mind raced. She'd saved Titan from a life of loneliness, coaxing him through grief to a new family. Now, Titan had saved Lila, his roar a shield against the wild. But what would become of this girl? The sanctuary was no place for a child, its trails too wild, its nights too cold. Yet the idea of Lila vanishing into an uncertain future felt like a betrayal, a failure Nora couldn't bear. The authorities arrived, their boots heavy on the wooden floor, their voices clipped and procedural. They explained that if no family was found, Lila would enter foster care, possibly an orphanage. Nora watched Lila, now playing with a toy car from Nora's desk, her laughter a fleeting burst of light in the dim office. The ranger's life was rugged, long hours tracking bears, repairing fences, battling poachers. Her cabin was small, its shelves lined with field guides, not storybooks. Yet Lila's presence had already shifted something in her, a warmth she hadn't felt since she'd cradled Titan as a cub, his tiny body trembling against hers. When the authorities mentioned foster care, Nora's decision came swiftly, almost recklessly. "I'll take her," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. She had no experience raising a child, but she couldn't let Lila face the world alone, not after what she'd endured. Days later, the news was grim. Lila's family couldn't be traced. The orphanage loomed, a cold specter that chilled Nora to the bone. She looked at Lila, who'd begun to smile more, her eyes sparkling when Nora showed her photos of the sanctuary's animals. Wolves howling at dusk, elk grazing in the meadows. Just yesterday, they'd driven past a clearing where bear cubs tumbled in the grass, their playful growls filling the air. Lila's squeals of joy had echoed in the jeep, her small hands clapping, her face alight with wonder. Nora saw the sanctuary anew through Lila's eyes, its wild beauty a gift she wanted to share forever. She knew Lila would one day ask why she'd been abandoned, and Nora wanted to be the one to answer, not with cold facts, but with the story of a bear who'd risked everything to protect her, a bear whose roar had rewritten her fate. Nora's mind was made up. She'd adopt Lila. The process was a marathon of bureaucracy, paperwork that piled up like snowdrifts, home visits that scrutinized her every choice, and endless questions about her unconventional life. Social workers raised eyebrows at her solitary existence, her cabin's lack of a proper nursery, her job's relentless demands. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" one asked, her pen hovering over a clipboard. Nora's jaw tightened. She wasn't sure. She was terrified, but she was certain of one thing. Lila belonged with her. She fought, driven by the same stubborn resolve that had saved Titan from death's grasp. She spent nights transforming her spare room, painting the walls with murals of bears and stars, sewing curtains from old flannel shirts. Lila helped, her tiny fingers smearing paint, her giggles a balm to Nora's doubts. They'd sit on the floor, eating peanut butter sandwiches, Lila's chatter filling the silence Nora had once cherished. Months later, the adoption was finalized, a hard-won victory that left Nora breathless with relief. To celebrate, she took Lila for a drive through the sanctuary, the Jeep's windows down, the air sharp with pine. The sun dipped below the mountains, casting an amber glow over the meadows, the light dancing on Lila's face. She pressed her nose to the window, her breath fogging the glass, her bunny tucked under her arm. In a clearing, they spotted Titan, his massive form sprawled in the grass, his fur gilded by the fading light. "Big bear," Lila whispered, her voice awed, her eyes wide with recognition. Titan lifted his head, his gaze meeting Nora's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. In that moment, Nora felt a profound connection. A ranger, a bear, and a child, bound by loss and redemption, their stories woven into the sanctuary's wild heart. Nora reached for Lila's hand, squeezing it gently, her heart swelling with a love she hadn't known she could feel. She knew Lila's life wouldn't be easy. Questions about her past would haunt her, rising like ghosts in quiet moments. The world could be cruel, its edges sharp for a girl who'd known abandonment, but Lila would grow up surrounded by the sanctuary's fierce beauty, its trails alive with the rustle of life. Nora would teach her to be fierce and kind, to track bears by their prints, to listen to the wind's secrets. And when the time came, Nora would tell her the story of Titan, not as a fable, but as truth. A bear who'd roared to save her, whose courage had carved a path to their family. Nora's family was unconventional, a grizzly's growl, a child's laughter, a ranger's steadfast love, but it was hers, forged in the crucible of compassion. She'd fight for it always, just as Titan had fought for Lila, his roar a testament to the wild's capacity for mercy. As the Jeep rolled on, Lila's head rested against Nora's arm, her breathing soft and steady. Nora glanced at the mountains, their peaks glowing in the twilight, and felt a quiet certainty. They were home. Compassion forges bonds stronger than blood, transforming strangers into family. When we choose courage over fear, empathy over indifference, we heal wounds and build futures where no one is abandoned. Titan's instinct to shield Lila and Nora's resolve to embrace her teach us that love is a defiant act, one that can rewrite destinies, silence grief, and create homes where hope thrives, even in the wild's untamed heart.